Welcome, track and field fans, to another edition of Mr. Rubio Used to Run, the Running Warehouse podcast. I'm your host, Joe, and my co-host here is Connor, and episode 36. We've been doing this a long time.
That's right, Joe, and today we've got on a pretty special guest.
A very special guest.
He's a legend in the coaching world and really one of the most successful NCAA track and field and cross-country coaches, creating powerhouses at Poly Slo and the University of Arkansas. And then on top of that, has also coached at the national level with Team USA at the World Championships, the Olympics. He's developed more athletes, developed more world-class athletes than I can count. Really, the amount of NCAA titles, it's probably up there as the most in the game. We've got a veteran, Lance Harter. Lance, how we doing today?
Hey, that's great. It's great to be here. I always love coming back to San Luis Obispo. Our children and their extended families, we rendezvous here every other summer and hang out at Avila Beach. In fact, that's been so prominent that one of our kids actually named their daughter Avila. So thank God that when he was real young, I always took him to Avila Beach, and thus the name for our granddaughter. Heaven forbid that we had taken him more to Pismo. So it would have been a real mess. But it's always great to be back here. Slo is a very special place, and I've been very fortunate to travel the world and see some of the more exotic places that travel agencies promote as ideal places to, vacation and so on and so forth. And I tell you what, it's real tough to beat San Luis Obispo and Avila Beach.
Yeah, I saw Lance last year. It was last year, 2 years ago, in the parking lot. And I said, what the heck are you doing here? He says, I need sunglasses, so I'm buying sunglasses from you. And I said, do you want to do a podcast? He says, well, we're getting ready to leave, but contact me next time I'm around. I'll do it. That's how we ended up with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're here.
Exactly.
Yeah, the time has arrived. Thank God. No, it's always great. Once you've been a part of San Luis Obispo and Cal Poly, the learn by doing philosophy is something that really means a lot to me. So I always have a fond, place in my heart about Cal Poly and the city, obviously, of San Luis Obispo. And a lot has changed, but then a lot has not. So, it's pretty cool to be able to come back and bring our children and keep that legacy alive.
Yeah. So speaking of children, where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Terra Nova High School in Pacifica, California. Uh-huh. So just south of San Francisco. My origin for running, back then I surfed a lot. And back then nobody wore full wetsuits. So you only wore a jacket.
Oh, geez, that's cold.
And
great white sharks and everything right there.
San Francisco, basically it's Pedro Point, which now has become famous as NorCal. But in their logo is a small little statement about Pedro Point. And that's the surf team that we kind of organized and surfed on a daily basis. One of the things that it's cold, and unless you have a fire, you better start running to be able to get your body heat back up. Because when you come out of that water, especially with just a jacket, those were hard, cold days. So I started running a lot on the beach with other guys that surfed. And then somebody recognized me that I was an incoming freshman at Terra Nova High School. And they said, hey, you ought to go out for the cross-country team. And running came pretty naturally. So introduced myself to the coach, and I was very blessed to have a guy named Dennis Latterman who was trained under Igloy. And that's one of the philosophies of running that, there's Lydiard side, more distance-oriented, and then there was Igloy, which much more interval-oriented. And so I was raised kind of from the start in a kind of a hybrid training program. So we did a lot of miles, but we did a lot of interval. And things went well until my junior year. Then my dad got a job transfer to southeast Denver, Colorado. That's before Colorado was discovered as a place to, be the heartthrob of running. Nobody knew anything about altitude. So my first 6 months, I tried to train under Coach Latterman's training regime, but didn't account for that there was an altitude factor. So I laid many a time on the side of a road, either breathing heavy or passed out. But eventually adapted to the altitude, had a good finish of a high school career, and that's back in the 60s, to say the least. It was a long time ago and primitive at best. But my senior year, there was a guy named Frank Shorter who had moved to Boulder, Colorado. And somehow my high school coach at Cherry Creek High School was able to get me connected with Frank. And so there was a few times where I was able to, join him in some workouts. He was extreme on the Lydiard side of training, and everybody was just experimenting with primitive exercise physiology, basically. And so did some running. It went well, got recruited quite a bit out of Cherry Creek High School, had an opportunity to go to school in Texas at Texas Tech, did my undergraduate degree there. Unfortunately, the coaching was absolutely horrible, and they didn't have a clue what was going on. But my attachment to Tech was a lot of California runners that I had run against previously before my move were going to school at Texas Tech. So I joined them, and, it was a trial of a series of errors. So a lot of times I would have to end up writing the workouts, and that was kind of my original idea, was to go into forestry and be a forest ranger. That didn't work out. And then my default was to teach history. And so I had a double major of history and physical education, and then wanted to get into coaching real bad. So I graduated at 22, was looking for college jobs. Obviously, there was not an athletic director dunce enough to hire a 22-year-old to be a coach. And then the high school that I had graduated from, Cherry Creek, built a brand new high school. The athletic director liked me and said, "Would you want to start the program at Smoky Hill High School?" And so I ended up at Smoky Hill as a teacher and coach, and it was great. We had some success right away, and then that sprungboarded me to finally getting a college job at 29.
And was that here?
At Cal Poly Slo.
Nice.
Yeah.
Who recruited you?
Well,
Did you look in the paper and there was a job offer?
There was Steve Miller. I didn't know Steve well at all, but my coach, that when I did my master's work and my PhD work at Colorado State, was connected to a lot of different coaches, and he said, "Hey, there's an opening in San Luis Obispo." I go, "Man, I know where that is," and was guns ablaze to try to apply and try to make the interview process. And I had my master's, so that helped as far as the teaching aspect, because the Cal Poly job was not only coaching and fundraising and so on, it also required you to teach up to 5 classes. So
what year was that?
I was 1979 was the interview, and I started that fall.
So that was right after Title IX came
Yeah,
in.
Title IX was evolving. When I came to SLO, it was AIW
Yeah.
recognition. And and then the men were in Division II. And then in a year, that finally got to transpire for women. And so we ended up joining the NCAA in Division II.
And what was this transition like from high school to college, and how quickly did you see success? Because when I look from, I think, 82 to 89, you won every cross-country title, 8 back-to-back. Like, what is that like?
You know, I was very, very blessed and very fortunate. When I came, Steve Miller was actually handling the distances for women besides his men's responsibility. So he had developed a young lady named Maggie Kais, who was just an outstanding individual well, she ended up being a national champion. So when I came on board, there was a transition that I encouraged, that Steve kind of influenced her through that year, and then in cross country make the transition. So it worked out really well. Maggie ended up being an NCAA champion, and then there was a young lady behind her named Eileen Kramer that was very special as well. And so those were kind of the building blocks to lay down a foundation. And then I brought a young lady from Denver to join, and then we just started recruiting like crazy. And it was a situation where teaching in the morning, 7:30 to roughly 1 o'clock. I would coach all the events because there was no assistants. Had 3 scholarships, so always kind of keeping an eye on 3 scholarships and the allotments that we had. And so we would teach in the mornings. Then in the afternoon, I coached all the events. And so fortunately, I had to do that a lot in high school. So I had some comfort zone in those areas. So coached as best we could. And then I was able to eventually attract Fred Harvey, who was finishing his sprint career at Cal Poly, and he wanted to get into coaching. So
He's just retiring now
he
from
just retired. Yes.
University of Arizona.
Yes.
And then you mentioned Maggie. She lives in town.
Yep.
And her husband just retired from Arizona State.
And Greg Kraft was a really good athlete at Poly, followed Steve Miller when Steve left to go to Kansas State, and got into the coaching bug, ended up being incredibly successful at University of South Carolina, and then eventually back to the West Coast at Arizona State.
And you mentioned Eileen. Her sister, Karen, lives in town.
Oh, Karen does?
Yeah.
Yeah,
She lives
Karen
over
was
on
for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Karen, it's nice when you have a legacy by family, and the Kramers had a lot of kids, but Eileen had a great experience at Cal Poly, and that I was kind of opened the attraction to go after Karen to come join us.
Another athlete, I'm just thinking of this because the Tour de France is going on right now, but Inga Thompson, right?
Yes.
So did she win the women's tour?
She was here as a freshman and the beginning of her sophomore year. Her dad was a physician in Reno, Nevada, and always encouraged her to cycle a lot. And so she ended up cycling, made the 1984 Olympic team on the road tour, and then eventually got picked up as a pro. And I don't know if she was a domestique or she was actually the lead for a women's cycling team. And then at Arkansas, we had a young lady named Lily Kleinman, who was a German, transferred from Boston University to Arkansas and had a great running career. And then when she left, she got recruited to be a domestique for the world champion and did the tour and so on and so forth. And she now lives in maybe one of the most beautiful places in the world in Switzerland. And
Yeah, Switzerland doesn't suck.
no,
It's pretty.
yeah,
pretty
and her
nice.
her view off her deck is looking right at the lake just outside of Zurich. Absolutely gorgeous, And Lily's, climbed part of Everest. I mean, she's quite the adventure gal, to say the least.
So
And
you
had a
mentioned
great
coaching
year.
all the events at Poly. When did you start getting? I mean, you mentioned Fred.
Yep.
Did you get a throws coach and hurdles and jumps?
Fred Harvey was with me for a year, and then after that, a gentleman named Dave Chinelli was a multi-eventer, decathlete in Santa Barbara, and they had a great decathlon training site down there.
Was
And he
Harry part of that at that time? Harry Mara?
Mara was
Yep.
part of it, yep. And then eventually he went to San Francisco State.
Right.
And then Dave came up and said, I'd like to join you to get in the coaching aspect. And because he was so multi-talented, he ended up being a fantastic coach for us, and then eventually became the head coach at Virginia Tech. Had a lot of success at Virginia Tech, and then he just retired this last year.
Oh, and then Karen Smith, were you coaching her?
Karen was. I worked with Karen specifically. I was able to attract an athlete of her caliber. She was in Germany, living in Germany, training in Germany and Sweden to become a better javelin thrower, and then liked the idea of maybe going to college. So we were able to attract her and another young lady named Tina Colebrook, who were both older, couldn't compete at the Division I level at the time because of age restrictions, which has now been thrown totally out of the door. But both of those athletes were also the foundation and building blocks that we were able to enhance for track as well as cross country.
So Karen, 5-time Olympian in the javelin.
5-time
So has the
Olympian.
NCAA record.
Yep.
In the javelin.
Yep.
And then Tina ran for Great Britain.
Great Britain
Right.
ran, I believe, in their World Championships. Just missed the Olympic team for Great Britain. At the time, Great Britain was kind of the dominant programs of
You had like Wendy Sly and that.
countries. Yeah, they were just
They're
absolutely
yeah.
loaded.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the precursor before the African countries really started coming in and dominating.
Tina and Karen both live in town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
So Tina
lives
by
up-
the.
yeah. And Karen, I think, still lives out in.
Yeah.
It's one of those places that it's really
Hard.
hard to pack up and leave, to say the least.
So how'd you end up at Arkansas?
Well, the success here at Poly went so well, unbeknownst to Warren Baker, who was our,
President.
president at the time. I had some job offers. Different people had reached out. We had turned down UCLA, USC, Cal Berkeley, and some others more in the Midwest and the East Coast. And then finally, Arkansas called, and it was a situation where it was just too good to turn down.
Yeah.
But we had won 14 national titles, eight in a row in cross country, and then 6 more in track. And we never competed indoors. So it was a situation where, if we had the resources, and that was always the limiting factor.
Still the limiting factor.
It's way better than it was. When I arrived here, my budget for track and field, that's equipment, travel, whatever else, hosting meets, etc., was $10,100. When I left 10 years later, the budget was $10,100. So it had not changed. And part of the justification by the administration was, you're winning all the time. Why do you need more money? And so it was a self-defeating prophecy. We wanted to stay successful, so those athletes had a great experience and great memories, fond memories to look back at in the years of their lives. And then also it was a springboard for me to look eventually, if I was going to leave, that there was an opportunity to leave to a good situation.
Yeah, because I don't want to say unlimited budget, but the bank account at Arkansas is pretty hefty.
I raised $30 to $35,000 a year every year to make the budget actually good enough. So the final year, which really kind of cemented the idea, you got to get out of here. Because believe me, I did not want to leave. But they had a rule that if you were in the top 3 in Division II in your respective event, you could advance to Division I. And that year, the Division I championships were at BYU in Provo, Utah. So we didn't have the resources. I was able to raise a little bit more money to be able to take a limited squad. And I think of that group who set a NCAA Division II scoring record that year, we weren't able to take either relay, and we had both fantastic short relay and a 4x4. Fred Harvey had done a great job of developing some people that were kind of under the radar for a lot of Division I programs, but developed to be prime Division I talents. And so we took a group up to Provo, Utah, and were told early on, I think when Karen and Danella went 1-2 in the javelin, that they said, okay, we're not going to post Cal Poly's scores. And I think that was driven by the track coach at Nebraska, Gary Pepin, who ended up being a long-term friend, actually recruited my brother to KU. But anyway, he was at Nebraska at the time, and I think everybody knew we had a powerhouse. So we went to Division I, competed with limited resources, and I think at the end of the meet we were third. And then you could hear the rumblings by my Division I peers that, hey, we got to shut this off and not let Division II come anymore. And so when they did, that just kind of reconfirmed in my mind, you've had offers, you need to look at them a little more seriously. And if something comes along that's just too good to be true, you need to take it. So along came Arkansas, and Bev Lewis at the time was the track coach that was going to become the women's athletic director. So I knew she had the resources and the sympathy of track and field. So it was just too good an offer to turn down. So I ended up packing up and leaving to Arkansas. On the last day out at Laguna Lake area, our home, we sold our home very quickly, which would be a steal right now if anybody wanted that house. But anyway, the moving truck was loaded, ready to go to close the doors, and I get a phone call from Ken Walker that he had talked to the president, Warren Baker, about the idea of me staying and giving me a substantial raise. It was really nice, but way too late in the process. So we closed the doors and loaded up and drove to Arkansas.
I mean, you get to Arkansas, and I imagine quite a change from the San Luis Obispo life. What is that like? And now you're coaching at the next level.
Yeah. The ally I had was a guy named John McDonald.
He had a very successful program at that
and
time.
He was absolutely
off the charts.
Dominant. John just, it was a snowball effect.
It was a machine.
Yeah, it was untouchable. And John just was always a great ally. We ran every lunchtime together, and it was like running with an encyclopedia of knowledge, because what about trying this or trying that and so on and so forth, and try to shortcut. And he was always very complimentary, because he knew and said it all the time, there's no way I can coach women. And also, as the careers evolved, he would say, "They're not paying you enough," because he would see, girls crying or, having a problem or one type or another. He goes, "Man, you're not paying them enough." So anyway, he was a great ally. It was a very easy adjustment. I mean, one of the things that at SLO, in my second year here, we won the national title for Division II. So, I'm 29, 30 years old, and we win a national championship. And then it just started snowballing from there. We always kind of weighted heavily in the distance area because of my strength and because my assistants were all volunteers. So Dave and Fred had to have other jobs to pay their bills, and there was never a conversation that assistant coaches would eventually be paid. So it was a lot of time of trying to just make ends meet. And I worked hard recruiting. A lot of people thought that was my real strength, was convincing people to come to San Luis Obispo, which is an easy sell.
Particularly, I would think, for parents. Right?
When it's a safe environment. And one of my lines that I used there, as well as at Arkansas, when you put your head on the pillow at night, I can assure you your daughter's going to be safe. And San Luis Obispo has that aura about it. Fayetteville, Arkansas has the same. Small, well-policed, things are just under control. I'm sure there's issues one way or another at both sites, but I know as a parent and having daughters, I want to make sure that I'm raising them in an environment where they can have fun, enjoy themselves, explore life in general, but not be threatened about the idea of something happening. I guess it could happen anywhere, but we did have an issue here at Slo that, unfortunately, a gentleman got out of prison, came down here because he was from the area, and ended up with a very negative situation for one of our athletes. But that was very rare to have happen. So you always want to make sure the kids have a great experience. We were very blessed to have a few alumni, but more of parents that were willing to help share in the costs of the experience for track and field for their daughters. And we were able to make ends meet. I did get audited by the IRS 5 years in a row. In fact, one of the last years I got audited, they always found something just enough to be able to challenge you to have to come back the next year. And because I was using a lot of my own money to make the program go, Cal Poly was very insistent that whatever debts you left, you had to cover personally. And I think that was a reaction of Coach Miller. He will always be one of the fondest people in my heart. But when he left a debt of $35,000. And the athletic director at the time, Vic Picola, said, you can stay on top of Steve to get that. And I, oh yeah, no problem. So I'd call Steve once a month and say, "Hey Steve, you still owe $35,000." And he goes, "Let him know the check's in the mail." And so it never did get. Well, I ended up raising some money and pieced it together to make Vic's budget balance as well as Coach Miller's intentions. Yeah. But we got it taken care of.
Yeah, we were just at Coach Miller's memorial. Was that a week ago?
Yeah. Yeah. Very special man, incredible speaker, very, very, very intelligent. And he would tell you, he would help any way he possibly could. In fact, I had to speak at a couple of different venues, and I would call him when he was in Vegas and just say, hey, when you spoke about this, do you have your lineup as far as what key points you hit, so on and so forth. And he was always more than gracious to walk me through, be it a funeral or a corporate event or whatever. He was always one of my all-time favorites. When I came here for the interview, they said, okay, in the evening, we're going to pass you off to Steve Miller, and we're going to enjoy your evening, and then we'll regroup as a committee the next day. So anyhow, he drives me out to Morro Bay. There's a place called the Hofbrau.
Oh, yeah.
So we go to the Hofbrau, and we have our trays, and we're sliding along. And he goes, do you want a beer? And I said, no, I don't drink beer. I'll just have, it was iced tea or a Coke or whatever. And he goes, yeah, I don't drink beer either. And so then we take our trays and I sit down. The place is empty. It's foggy. It's chilly. I'm shaking trying to stay warm out there. And all of a sudden he sits down at the table and he's got a pitcher of beer. And he goes, you don't drink, right? And I said, no. I said, never got a taste for it. He goes, yeah, I don't drink either. And wiped out the pitcher of beer in moments. And we had our Hofbrau sandwich and drove back. I was going, so this is the character of all characters, to say the least. We were at the first national championships together, which Maggie won. He said, we're going to go to a steakhouse. I'm buying. I said, hey, fantastic. So we go to the steakhouse, and the lady walks up and goes, so what do you want? And he goes, I want your biggest steak you got. And she goes, okay, well, it's this one at so many ounces. And she was very proud of the potential order. And she said, well, how do you want it? And he goes, I want it rare. Do you have a light bulb in the kitchen? And she goes, I'm not sure. And he goes, take the steak, put it on a platter, put it under the light bulb once, turn it over, put it back on the light bulb, and serve it. And that's how I want rare to be. So it was just always a barrel of laughs. I mean, it was Coach Miller, it was hilarious. And when I would call him, even, just a couple months ago, he would answer the phone and go, do you realize how many important people I've had to turn down while I'm wasting my time with you? And I was like, yeah, I appreciate that he goes, there are kings and queens that are trying to speak with me. I said, I know, the Agassiz are a great family, and I'm sure there's people wanting to talk to you to be able to get to them. They don't want to really talk to you. They want to talk to Andre. And so we could kind of dish it out back and forth. And, a lifelong friend. So my wife and I flew out to Vegas to be with him and went to dinner. Unfortunately, he was not doing well, had a cane, had a driver, so on and so forth. Insisted that we stay at his house. And Kim said, if I'm going to Vegas, I want to stay on the Strip and get that experience and so on. So we met him for dinner, had a fantastic meal and lots of laughs and reminiscing and so on and so forth. And I will cherish those moments for the rest of my life, to say the least.
So some of your coaching mentors, people that you...
Steve was definitely one of them. The ability to motivate, He was exceptional.
Yeah, he's very good. Yeah.
And he was also more than adventurous when it came to training. I said at his memorial, I arrive here, and he said, okay, we're going to go to a training camp in South Lake Tahoe. I'm going, we're in San Luis Obispo. The rest of the world wants to come here and train. Oh, no. We got to go to South Lake Tahoe for 10 days. I said, well, where's that money coming from? Oh, the kids will pay for it. We'll get the kids to donate money and so on and so forth. And so we went to South Lake Tahoe, and he was able to entertain himself, to say the least. But we had some great training and had some great times together. Like John McDonnell, those people are such a resource that I think I always felt I need to exploit this experience as much as possible and absorb, everything, to say the least. As part of the Olympic staff, they asked me to be one of the coaches to do this exchange with the East Germans and the Russians when the wall went down. And we met in Austin, Texas. It was a phenomenal experience. There was no holds barred. You could ask any question you want. So a couple of us that were representing the U.S., first thing we're going to ask is, hey, did you use drugs? They went, yeah. What's the problem? Well, then how did you do it? And they explained their protocol, but they were very proud and very insistent to let you know when the athlete was at the end of their career, they would say, and then we would taper them back. So when they came back into society, they were normal people. And they were very insistent that we knew that. And so one of the questions we asked is, what do you think of the U.S. system? And they said the ages of 14 to 18 that we led the world. We did a better job than any other country in the world. And then they said from 18 to 24, we were terrible. And we said, well, correlating 18 to 24, those are the college era. And they said they could not understand that athletes would pick choices that weren't enhancing their career. And they just did not comprehend that as a possibility. And so we tried to explain it to them, and they said, that system is terrible. You need to take those developers that you do such a great job of and then program them where they should go. And
but now it's like the envy of the world is our college system.
No doubt about it. The college system, the development program by USA Track and Field really took that to heart, is having these junior training camps that I got to be an integral part of, where every summer we'd identify 25 to 50 emerging elite female athletes. And the development budget would cover their expenses, and a lot of times encourage their coach to come as well. And we would either be in Colorado Springs or in Chula Vista and spend a week together, introduce a lot of physiology, a lot of the training concepts that are out there to make sure coach as well as athlete were well educated about what our sport has to offer, and talk about. And a lot of the athletes that we have now and this generation prior were all part of those junior programs. And then there was a different change in philosophy by USA Track and Field that they were going to take those monies and basically give it to potential medalists. So they gave up the grassroots aspect. But fortunately, the collegiate system has continued to nurture our next generation. and it's continuing to be very successful.
I mean, throughout Cal Poly and at Arkansas, you've had more than numerous. You had tons of athletes continue on and do better after college than in college. I'd say like Dina Castor is a great example.
Exactly. The whole idea, philosophy-wise, is the chronological age of eliteness for females is, especially for endurance aspect, is 28 to 32. So obviously that window is not possible in college, although there are some that are of African descent that are exploiting that option. But anyway, that's the new NCAA. But my philosophy was, hey, your best years are still well ahead of you. If you choose to stay in this sport and you want to be an elite athlete and potentially what we call a pro athlete, is potentially get a contract and so on and so forth. So I've always worked diligently to have the connections that if an athlete emerges, try to help them, place them where they will continue to nurture, and then eventually, if they're good enough, to be able to have a contract with whatever shoe company that has interest and accommodates the individual.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the difficulties of, recruiting nowadays. And, when we look back historically over the years, 70s, I mean, this isn't necessarily a new problem. We've had teams like Allegheny Community College who had some amazing world-class African athletes. Texas, of course. Ted
Banks.
Yeah.
Ted Banks and the gentleman before him, both,
was it Nambui?
Yeah, and brought in the Nyambuis of the world and Wilson Wegwa and so on and so forth. When I was at Colorado State, we hit UTEP's prime years. When I was at Texas Tech, UTEP had a guy named Wayne Vandenberg bring in Brit and Irish guys. And I remember running at the Oklahoma State Jamboree. One of my idols was always Jim Ryan. I did a lot of his workouts and so on and so forth. And Coach Timmons is always gracious to me. And eventually recruited my brother. And Glenn ended up being an All-American at Kansas. But, I was running in this race, and I think I was 15th to 20th or so. Jim Ryan is fading. I'm going by him. And then all of a sudden this pack of runners come up, and they're talking to each other. And it was the UTEP first generation, and they were, all very accent with English or Irish accents and very mature. And they just came up to us and they said, I was like looking at them going, oh my God, there's 5 of you. And they go, yeah. And we're getting ready to go. Took off. End of race.
Yeah. I remember this was years ago. You and I and Sheldon Blockberger were in Des Moines sitting in the stands, and you were mentioning something called the portal. And I was asking you about the portal. And you said, this is going to be the end of my career, this portal thing.
Yeah.
You call it like a used car salesman kind of thing.
Yeah. For those that can't coach, and I'm being very generalized, but there are a lot of people out there that are trying to preserve a meal ticket. In other words, keep their job.
Yeah.
And if you don't develop athletes and you can't recruit well, you're vulnerable to getting fired. And some of these coaches have great jobs, to say the least. I remember Brooks Johnson always saying, if you think you're having a hard time coaching and getting paid to coach, try a real job. And I always kind of, that stuck in my mind that, hey, I better enjoy what I'm doing. And so a lot of these coaches have created a market for ready-made athletes, is what I call them. They're older, mature, have tremendous mileage behind them and experiences behind them. And their option now is, hey, you can go to college, we can get you an education, which I never find fault with, that everybody should have an opportunity to educate themselves to a new level. But now everybody and their uncle is exploiting the African connection. And it's not cheap. It's expensive, but it saves recruiting. This generation of high school athletes in the U.S. are getting overlooked unless they're a superstar, because you can buy or rent, or whatever you want to call it, a 28 to 31-year-old distance runner, and I'm speaking more on the female side, versus, trying to develop an 18-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? If on the boys' side, are you going to recruit a California 852 miler, or are you going to get a 1310 person from overseas?
Yep. And the 852 miler is our future as a country, no doubt about it, if they're in the right hands and patiently developed to the next level. But now we're throwing them head to head with, like you said, a 13 or faster seasoned veteran that, are on the verge of, they're on the downhill side for many cases of their Olympic experience, world championship capabilities. The portal, is just a situation where there's hundreds of athletes out there that are for hire. And unfortunately, a lot of the American athletes that maybe made a mistake and went to the wrong school, or that school doesn't have their major anymore, which does happen, or a change in philosophy. Hey, I'm not going to be a forest ranger, I'm going to be a track coach. Well, that doesn't line up with the same degree. So those opportunities now are disappearing, but the option is the portal. The problem is there are so many great athletes on the portal. Many of them are international seasoned veterans that are taking those opportunities away from some of our younger American athletes.
And there's not any, I don't know if it's responsibility on the athlete's part. Like, I committed to Arkansas, but I can leave anytime I want. Versus before, when I transferred from Irvine here, I had to get approval from Vince, and I had to sit out a year.
Yep.
Right.
And
so there were some ramifications for changing.
There were some NCAA rules, and there was some age limit. The age limit rule is still out there. Apparently, it's being ignored 100%, or proof of your age, the number of years. The rule is for every year after 21, it counts as a year against your eligibility that you were competing in track and field. So to try to limit a 23, 24-year-old would be the max you would compete against as a newcomer into the sport, as an 18-year-old. Now those days are gone. I mean, there's no secret. There's older athletes out there. You can look it up on their website. Some of them have been professional athletes. A few of my athletes have a common agent, and he is Kenyan, but he is a medical doctor in Washington, D.C. So he still has his Kenyan connections. He called me one night and said, "How is such and such eligible?" And I said, "I don't know. The school allowed her to be eligible." He goes, "She's 28 years old." He goes, "I tried to sign her 8 years ago where I was going to have her become a professional road racer in Europe. Wow. And now she's in college." So it's a whole
And then you have
different
the
generation.
roster limits. Like I'm talking to Louis this
Yes.
past spring,
Yes.
and his ability to bring in people that might take a chance on that he thinks can develop is limited.
Yes. And then it becomes down to the personal philosophy of the head coach. At the SEC, women are allowed to have 45 roster spots, the men only 35. So Chris Bucknam, our head coach at Arkansas, has a real task about, hey, I got to keep my sprint crew alive, my throws crew, my jumps crew. Now, traditionally, I'd have 5 or 6 scholarship athletes in the distances and depend on roster volunteers on the roster to develop and keep the roster
Yeah, the walk-ons
healthy.
basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
and now that is gone. So philosophically, do you cut certain emphasis in your sport that no longer is going to be worthy? Arkansas, for example, women-wise, we didn't recruit throwers very much unless you were a real hitter because they were expensive, and that same amount of money I could put in a distance runner, give me depth in cross country, potential scorer indoors as well as outdoors. So it becomes a philosophical decision by the coaching body, and some are going to flourish in that environment and others are going to perish.
So with all these issues we're seeing with recruiting and, potential age issues, do you see any fixes in the system, or are we kind of open a can of worms that it's out and it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a can of worms that could go in a lot of different directions. My advice to any sophomore, junior in high school that's emerging elite, potentially, a state finalist, a scorer, potentially, Foot Locker caliber or Nike caliber, start writing letters. Make sure that the area geographically that you're interested in, you might be interested in 4 schools in this geographic window. Let them know, hey, I'm emerging, my academics are good, my test scores are good, I really want to compete at the college level, because you almost now have to become a real salesman. There's a young lady in San Diego that I helped a little bit, hey, if you can take your visits your junior year and you have good enough marks and credibility, college coaches are going to be interested, do it your junior year. So you're on the radar. And, if you start to struggle, make sure that communication with that coaching body is direct and frequent, because more and more coaches are taking the easy way out. One, if you're recruiting an international athlete, usually it's a couple of phone calls and secure the finances, end of discussion. If you are working with an elite high school athlete, there's visits, there's lots of calls, continuous calls. And recruiting wise, the hardest part for coaches is recruiting. Yeah, there's the time obligation for recruiting is far exceeds the X's and O's time.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure when you started coaching, you liked the training aspect.
No doubt about it. That was the secret was, if you come to SLO, I guarantee you one thing, you're going to get better. At Arkansas, the same philosophy. Hey, it's a sound training system, physiologically, psychologically, socially as well, that systematically you're going to get better.
Yeah.
And then if you want to springboard to the next level, fantastic. You're welcome as a Razorback to stay, and we'll give you the support mechanism medically, et cetera, to continue this adventure. But Yeah, it's interesting. And the portal also is another twist to it because, hey, we're this good, but if I had another 1630 5K girl
Right.
to give me a little more depth in case we do have a setback of illness or injury or whatever, we need that type of backup. And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so you're competing against the pros as well as, I mean, the pro athletes that still have athletic eligibility, and also some of your high school peers.
And when we look historically, your time at Cal Poly, you were winning year after year. I think from 89 to 90, you brought back 95% of your team. You had that confidence. And then in Arkansas, you have all these national titles. What is it like being on top, and how do you motivate people to continue to keep coming back? Because, there's only one way to go once you're at the top.
Yeah. It's kind of like Nick Saban said, and I think there was another coach prior to him that said, you create a monster, you got to feed it. Because expectations, when we had 3 scholarships, my budget is $10,100 for the 8th consecutive year, I'm begging for more money. They're going, you're winning. So winning hurts the end product of trying to defend why you should get more. And when I left, Deanne Vorchhauser, I was able to convince Deanne to be my successor. And I said, Deanne, one thing I'll promise you, that the cadre that we have here, you're going to win 2 national titles because the cupboard is stocked. And I took a few athletes out of that cupboard, but she still won 2 national titles. And then it's just comes back down to hard work and determination to try to keep it going. And Deanne did a great job, and then had the opportunity to go to Cal Davis and be with her husband, John, which Cal Poly at the time wouldn't let John come here. So another
It's always been a difficult university.
classic, classic
And
administrative
for those that don't know,
decision.
Deanne was the meet director for the Olympic trials.
Yeah, and was the Olympic coach.
Yeah.
The head Olympic coach
Yeah.
in Atlanta. Phenomenal coach, great person, is getting ready. She lives in Reno, Nevada. Has talked about the idea a few days ago of moving back to the San Luis Obispo area. So,
We'll have quite the coaching staff.
yeah. Once it's in your heart and your blood, it's hard to walk away from. This is a very special place, and it's a great location, ideally for training and so on. And now with the new track that Steve and John put together, that really makes it an enviable place, to say the least. And I was one of the people that pounded the desk via the phone about Ryan, that I thought he would do a great job here, because he's a heck of a coach, and he's still evolving in his career, that he's still hungry to develop more. And his wife, that might be the secret. She's a heck of a coach. So anyway, I wish them nothing but luck. And, if I can steer people to come to San Luis Obispo, there's 2 schools I would probably never recruit against, Stanford and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Wow.
Because the experiences are just so beyond just the run,
It's a great college experience. I mean, that I think
No doubt.
in my brain, it's in Division I track and field. It's going to be like the top 40 schools that are largely buying athletes. And then the second tier is going to be something like a Cal Poly or Oregon State that's going to be more of a developmental,
Yes.
more about the experience that we had when we went to college.
Yep.
Whereas you're competing, but it's part of the whole education process. It's about enjoying the
More
whole.
of the tradition that we were all raised through. And it's a real shame that NCAA Division I rankings a lot of times are not a reflection of the quality coaching as it is the quality recruiting. And recruiting has always been a factor. But the idea is now if you have an arsenal of money, for example, at Texas Tech, some booster wanted to make sure that Texas Tech softball was going to be nationally recognized, and went to the coach. They made a relationship, and the shortest route to success
is buying a pitcher.
Is buy a pitcher. Yeah,
that's what they did.
And if she can hit as well, that's a bonus. Years and years ago, UCLA did that, and Australian Olympian, phenomenal athlete, just absolutely, nobody could hit against her, and she could hit. So UCLA wins national titles.
Yeah, I was at Bill Dillinger's memorial, the one that his athletes put on, and they tried to limit it to 3-minute talks, and those went on for an hour and 45 minutes. And the bulk of those people that spoke were walk-ons. Wow. And they're talking about teams of 75, 80, 90 guys that were all trained together.
Yep.
Those days are gone in D1.
Yep. Unfortunately, the portal system creates an environment that you're the number 10 person at your school. It looks like the deck is kind of stacked against you to ever be a scorer on that particular cross-country team. Then the portal is an option for you to find a new home if that's something. But very interestingly, with the portal situation, nobody talks about academics. And what's really sad, I still feel and identify myself as an educator. That's how we have the position, is we're supposed to be educators. Are we responsible for a specific aspect of the education? Yeah, probably the hardest class anybody's ever going to take is being a cross-country runner at any Division I or Division II program. Our AD allows at Arkansas for the men to have a separate staff and the women to have a separate staff. And he said, all my peers are combining men and women's programs. And the one staff takes care of everybody. And my response to him, you have a son. What's the hardest class he has to take? He goes, chemistry. I said, do you want him in a class of 100 or in a class of 40? And he goes, well, class of 40. I said, I rest my case. Because the one-on-one relationship is so valuable that when you're saturated with numbers, it makes it that much more difficult to be able to have that bond of trust that coach and athletes have.
Yeah, the communication element is, I think, something that a lot of people don't think about with coaching. You're thinking about the workouts, but half the battle is being able to communicate effectively and having that trust.
No doubt about it. And I think when I speak to a lot of clinics, one of the prime emphasis is the idea of communication and vocabulary. You not only have to be able to communicate it, but they have to understand the vocabulary. There are some phenomenal exercise physiologists out there, and they can talk over all of our heads to 3 stories taller. Well, if you have all this knowledge and you can't communicate to the respective individual that's going to try to expedite the plan, it's a moot point, because you're talking in a foreign language and they don't understand what you're talking about.
And another misnomer is just because you're a good athlete doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach. And some of the best coaches that I know I don't even know how fast you ran in college and so forth, but someone like a Joe Vigil or Frank Gagliano, right? I don't know how fast Ryan was, right? It's just like...
In fact, I think a lot of elite athletes struggle because they can't comprehend how can you be that slow? This should become easy for you, especially with technical events. Who was it? One of the great long jumpers became an assistant coach at Tennessee years ago, and basically ran off all the jumpers that were under his direction because he kept chastising them, going, this should be easy. I can do this. I had a phenomenal athlete named Gigi Johnson. She is now married to Chris Johnson, the head coach at Arkansas. Before the national championships indoors in the triple jump, she went to our coach at the time, Lonnie Green, who's now the director at Kentucky. She goes, Coach, and she was kind of frozen. She goes, I can't remember. Is it hop, step, or hop, hop? And Lonnie was an ex-triple jumper. And so they went out in the back of the arena and jumped together holding hands. She won the national championship in the triple jump. And then came back a couple hours later and anchored the national champion 4x4. Yeah, just phenomenal athlete. But, we all go brain dead at one time or another. Sometimes it might be just driving home and all of a sudden, you take the wrong turn. It's like, what? Why did I do that? And so in the thick of the battle, when things are really amped up and the fans are there and so on and so forth, in the heat of the moment, sometimes we get a brain freeze, and that happens even at the most elite level. The Olympic Games, I'm in Barcelona. We're at the warm-up track, which is adjacent to the actual Olympic stadium. We arrive early to make sure that everything's going to be subtle. Great 800-meter runner. We get there, and I'm looking around. We have a camp just for U.S. athletes, and all of a sudden I'm going, where is she? And I'm chasing around the area, and she's warming up. I'm going, we're 2 hours from your race time. What is your normal procedure for warm-up? About 40 minutes. Sit down. And she just nervous, anticipatory. This is the greatest experience that she'll have in her 4-year preparation for the Olympic Games and Olympic team. And, she just kind of went into automatic pilot that, wait a minute now, look at the time. At the same time, Lynn Jennings forgets, she opens her bag up 2 hours out, and she goes, you're not going to believe it. I brought 2 left spikes. So, what room are you in? Give me your key. I jump back in a cab, shoot back to the Olympic Village, go to her room, find the right for the pair, bring it back, and she wins the Olympic bronze medal.
Wow.
So maybe that little bit of anxiety, I don't have spikes and we're at the Olympics, so on and so forth, made her relax and just focus on the task at hand. But obviously she took advantage of it, set the American record, and won a bronze medal out of it.
One of the things that I always found just phenomenal was the fact that your team in one school year won cross-country D1 title, indoor nationals, and outdoors. And as I remember at the outdoors, you guys weren't favored.
Yeah.
Was it Texas that was favored?
At University of Texas, yeah. And SC was there chomping at the bit. people go, when you have such a long career of coaching, 52 years, can you highlight one moment? Well, that one moment is a year, 2019, where we won indoor at home. Dominique Scott ran the 3,000. If she finishes, within the top 8, we're going to win the meet. She wins it. By the way, got engaged right after the race because her husband's standing there with a diamond. So she could have got a medal or a diamond, and she took the diamond. But that was phenomenal. It was in our backyard at our indoor facility. Went outdoors. We knew that things were going to be really tough. Taylor Werner ran a double 10.5 in Austin's heat and humidity. She got second and second. So we sprung board. But to show you the atmosphere of that team, we had 2 great vaulters. One of them became an Olympian as a freshman in college. They're cheering for her every lap that she's going around because we had discussed prior, just after breakfast, that this is a team thing. The points are going to be very, very close. We can't take anything for granted. And we ended up winning the event in the mile relay at the end of the meet. So we did absolutely perfect for TV to keep the audience attentive. But anyway, it was that type of camaraderie that they just would not let each other down. And so that distance crew comes back for cross country. A young lady named Katie Izzo.
Yeah, she went to Cal Poly.
Went to Cal Poly, had kind of an up and down career. We knew she was talented because when she was healthy, she would destroy people. Came to Arkansas, joined that cadre, and stimulated kind of a new blood to join the group. But the philosophy they had that, hey, we're not going to let each other down. We're going to live for you. I'm going to live for me. You're going to do the same for me and for you. So we are in the cross country meet. It's in Indiana, Terre Haute, Indiana, as cold as maybe I've ever been. Rain, snow, sleet combo, and wind. So you're wet, you're drenched, and it's mud. It was just a traditional, ideal cross country. When they designed cross country with the word cross country, it was true cross country. BYU had a great team. Stanford had even a better team than us on paper. We get in the race. We divided into pairs where Katie and Taylor ran side by side. Devin and one of the other girls. And then the tail group was Lauren Gregory, and because she was coming off of an injury, and our little redheaded girl just did a fabulous job, and they ran. And so when I would go to a point, I would say, T, are you okay? Yep. And then Katie would go, I'm fine too. And then it worked for each pair. And then all of them ran a better second half of that race than they did in the first half. And so they were just running people down. And we ended up beating BYU by 6 points. She still, the coach at BYU still reminds me today, it was only 6 points, and she had a phenomenal team. But on that given day, we were just better, and were able to out-hustle at the end of what could be done and how it was going to be done. And then she has since won, I think,
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's doing okay.
And she's got a powerhouse. Deljeet does a great job. Whenever I see her, I remind her of, how good a job she's doing, because her athletes always get better, and that's hard to do in this business, to keep rising to the challenge.
How's retirement treating you? Is it? You mentioned 50 plus years of coaching, so you're through these things of like it's September. You're not right. You're supposed to be in Arkansas or somewhere coaching.
Yeah. So I retired officially, and the university was more than gracious to do this event that was phenomenal. I got my first bobblehead, which is kind of clever. But was really the surprise is they named the indoor track after me.
Wow.
And so my name is blended in. It's out of Mondo. They've actually cut my name, a signature, and imprinted it into the straightaway of the start of the track. So that was a great honor, to say the least. My wife would tell you that I've done a really bad job of retiring. And then fortunately or unfortunately, depending on if you ask her, the successor came for a year, and then Chris Johnson was in Paris at the Olympics with our elite corps of athletes, and she quit. And it was the 1st of August. And so he called and said, "Hey, can you help me out?" And I'm thinking I either water his lawn or mow it or do something of that nature. And he goes, "I need you to coach cross country this year." So I asked Kim, and Kim was okay with it. And I've been blessed with a wife that has been incredibly supportive, because in this business, if as much travel as you did, in fact, one year she said, "Do you realize last year you were gone or at a meet at home 47 weekends out of the year?" And because I'd never thought about that. People go, "Well, how many All-Americans do you have?" I was like, man, I'm just trying to take care of the next one. National championships are easy to remember because there's only 7, but there was 14 here. And then I was helping with the 2 in the year of transition from me to Chris Johnson. He asked me to stay on and help, and they won indoor and outdoor. So, it becomes kind of a blur, to say the least. But so I did cross country, and then Kim said, "Okay, that's it. You're retired." So one of the things that she's allowed me to do, and I have great joy with, is I work with like 5 pro athletes, or post-collegians, basically. A couple have contracts, a couple don't. But it's a small, manageable number. Like right now, they just finished a workout. So when I leave, I'll get a phone call of what they did in this respective workout. And I enjoy it. That's why Saturday I was at the meet.
Yeah.
Because Logan is kind of coming off an injury, trying to get ready for the USA meet. And she's had kind of a tough year, so I just wanted to make sure I was there to support her. So yeah, it's been an adjustment. She was the associate athletic director in charge of finances, so she was the CFO. When she walked out the door the last day, she never came back. She just, "That's it, I'm done." She could walk away from the desk quite readily. She does not understand that when you're coaching, it's a different energy system. You look forward to going to work. The AD said, "Do you really want to retire?" I said, "Well, I think it's time, and you don't want to lose Chris Johnson. So, I'll step to the side and help him as much as I possibly can, and we have a great relationship. So, was it hard to walk away from the money? Yeah, because bonuses are very generous at Arkansas when things go well.
Right.
So the year we won the Triple Crown,
You got a new car.
that was a very special year, to say the least. No, and our kids have, I'm fortunate to have 3 of my 5 grandchildren in our backyard, so to speak, in the neighboring area. And then of the 5 children that Kim and I have as a blended family, 4 live in the area. And then my oldest, Jeff, lives in Atlanta and is, a world traveler and so on and so forth. It's come a long way since I lived in Creekside Mobile Home Park.
Well, and talking about a long way, I feel like a good way to end this might be taking a blast 40 years ago, almost to the date. I found an article from the local 5-City Times. This is from 1985, and it was titled Running Shoes More Than Just Padding. Now, this was an article on the significant advances in running technology back in the day. Around 1985, we were seeing big changes from the 60s and 70s. And me and Joe both read the whole article. And the funny part about it is when you read it now, it almost sounds very similar to what we're experiencing now from the last couple years with the huge changes in increased foam, lighter weight shoes of the super shoes we see today. So I pulled up a couple quotes that you had, and you brought up the primary goal is to develop shoes that are lighter than those in the competition, but also offer the protection. Now shoes have the pocket of air, obviously referring to the Nike Air units. And It is funny because right now we're seeing shoes get up higher. You see some of these shoes on the table. I mean, I don't think you ever thought you could get this much stack in a shoe at this light of a weight. And really the Adidas Evo 2 really taking the cake of sub 5 ounces, over 40 millimeters of stack. Technically it's 40.
Phenomenal shoe.
Oh, it's just crazy. Yeah. And you have to wonder how much better we're going to get. If we go back another 20 years in the future, what these shoes are going to look like.
What's really cool is that there are some very, very intelligent, articulate people out there that are constantly thinking about how to get to the next advance. I was fortunate to take my daughter and go with Tinker Hatfield and review the kitchen about concepts like this that we saw 10, 12 years ago. It's amazing the advancement of the shoe and seeing Hoka and so on. When you think of Adidas, you think of the original.
Yeah.
They started the empire, and Puma, was a brother down the road. And then ASICS, of course, and the history of how it began Blue Ribbon Sports and Nike. Jeff Hollister, one of the original 3, was handing out shoes at a meet in Wichita, Kansas, and had a little guy named Wes Ashford, became a sub 4-minute miler. But at 14, I set the national age group record for the 1500. And Jeff Hollister walked up and said, "What size of shoe does he wear?" And I said, "Hey, I'm not sure." So I introduced Wes. And Jeff Hollister is this nobody that has his bag, and he's pulling out a pair of shoes that were, they were so raw about, there was glue patches, and it was like somebody was doing it in their garage, and might have been. But anyway, it was a new spike. Now, many, many years later, a guy named Jonathan, who's in charge of spike design, Arkansas does wear testing for them, and he drives up from Dallas and meets with us about designing new spikes. And They were working on an 800-meter specialist spike as of late. And then the last time I chatted with him, he said, well, now I'm tasked with creating a shoe for the 40-yard dash for football players to run a faster 40. And he said they'll sell like hotcakes to get them ready for the, what do they call that, where they go to India?
There's whatever. Combine, yeah.
Yeah, the combine.
So a week ago, maybe 8 days ago, I was in Portland for that memorial.
Yep.
And I went running on the Hollister Trail.
Yep.
Which is across the street from the Nike track.
Surrounds the Nike World Headquarters.
And I knew Jeff Hollister, but the only time I would see him the last couple of years of his life was in the old Hayward Field in the East Grandstands at the urinal. 3 years in a row at Nationals. I'd see him at the Olympic Trials or Nationals. That was the only time. It was weird.
It's anytime, it's amazing who you bump into
in
those restrooms. Yeah. And it's usually flashing in and flashing out because you don't want to miss the next event.
Yeah.
No, the facility that Mr. Knight put together at Eugene is unbelievable. I happened to be having lunch with John Capriati, and he said, sit down with me. And I was like, okay. So and he goes, I'm setting up a team that's going to take the Nike Jet to Europe and study the best facilities for track and field, basically in all of Europe. And so he's at Oslo, and he had this one, and Zurich, and so on and so forth. And he goes, can you think of any other places that they should go look at? And I said, well, how many thousand are we looking at? And he goes, probably a stadium of 10, 15,000. And so that concept was already emerging, and they're blessed to have a fan like Phil that would underwrite it and put it together and make it a reality. And it is a phenomenal facility. Obviously held world championships, so on and so forth. Phil came to Fayetteville for the NCAA championships when Galen Rupp was part of the Oregon team, and they were favored to win. So my office is very, very nice. Is all windows that looks down at the track. It's on a second, probably third floor, looking down, and it has a patio as well. So somebody called and said, could Phil be comfortable, and could you hide him in that facility? Because he doesn't want to deal with everybody and pulling on him and asking questions and so on. So by all means, he can come and stay here. We'll restrict it to just his entourage, and he has some old buddies that travel with him. So they flew in, he came over, he was more than gracious, always super nice. And my youngest at the time was probably 14, and so it was understood at the house that everybody only wears Nike when you come to Dad's office. Of course, Christy, the youngest, walks in and she has on Converse shoes. And he picked that up as soon as she walked in the door. And we had food and beverage and so on and so forth all set up in the office. And he popped out of the patio and was on her like that. And I'm like, oh no, here we go. I mean, it was unbelievable. So he wanted to know why women's track was Nike. Because of my situation here at Cal Poly, I was able to bring it to Arkansas with me. And everybody else was Reebok or Apex, or they were always some other brand. And so he was curious about that. So he has this conversation. I grab Christy after about 20 minutes by the scruff of the neck, walk out to the hallway, and she goes, Dad, you won't believe it. He asked me all these questions. And turned out he wanted to know how many pairs she had, what color ups, high top versus low top, what her friends wear, so on and so forth. He was basically doing research.
He bought it, right?
And he bought it. He sold Cole Haan soon after and bought Converse. And somebody told me, it might have been Cap, that he bought it for 250 million or something of that nature. And last year it just barely missed $1 billion in sales. And still, you go to the Nike employee store, Converse is still well represented. But yeah, Christy to this day still thinks she's part owner of Converse. But, did some of the initial research.
Wow.
Well, this has been fantastic. I mean, thank you so
Love
much
it.
for your time.
Oh, love it. I'll be back in 2 years.
Yes. And you notice we didn't
I'll
talk
have more stories.
I know. We didn't talk a thing about training. So maybe next time,
Love it.
because I'm more the story kind of guy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people that listen, and I'm interested in the X and O's, like what you started doing here, what you do at Arkansas, and where you're at
How
now.
it
Like
evolves,
like
yeah.
like this double threshold thing.
Yep.
Is that part of your those types of things. So
Yep.
we'll talk in 2 years.
I'll be back in 2 years.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Anytime. No, my pleasure. It's always an honor.
Cool.
All right. Well, until next time, the only thing that people can't forget, what do they got to do, Joe?
They have to like,
Yeah.
comment, and subscribe.
Right.
And are we having any contests or anything like that?
Yeah, we got the contents always going. So if you do all those three, send us a message. We'll
Give
get
you a pair of shoes.
Yeah, maybe.
No, we will. We'll
All
get them
right.
a pair of shoes. Come on.
All right.
All right.
We'll do it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Lance.
Okay. See you guys.
There's a whole warehouse of them.
I know. Peace out.